Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Kitchen. Starting my day out with my delicious coffee and wanting to talk to you guys about GLP-1s, whether to use them, whether to not use them. So I got a lot of questions recently about people are observing other people using GLP-1s and having great success. And I think that maybe people don't observe when people are not having great success. And I have clients that come to me for weight loss that are in both camps. And so I wanted to kind of review what I have seen over the years when weight loss shots and different doses and drugs were introduced. And I do think that recently there's been some adjustments to the dosing, some of the newer medications that are promising for some people. Initially, I did see a lot of side effects. I saw a lot of hair loss in women, which I still see, but far less. I saw a lot of GI upset, nausea, vomiting, inability to eat any type of food whatsoever. And so those were suboptimal for a couple of reasons. So, it made me think like, oh no, that's great. Now I'm not eating, right? So not actually, because the amount of food that people weren't able to tolerate really kind of cut into the necessary nutrients and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, even just carbohydrate and fats and proteins that your body needs to sustain itself, right? You got to beat your heart, you got to digest food, blink your eyes, you got to walk, whatever you needed to do, your body needs to have some type of energy to do that properly. And fats and proteins are a little bit harder to digest. So those are sort of like the first things to go on these GLP-1s. And so simple foods, easy to digest foods like carbohydrates were a little bit more tolerable. So not really the optimal choices, right? Your brain needs some fats to think. We need fats for internal organs. We need fat for digestion. So we do need these foods, and those foods were not, I observed people not being able to get those foods in the right amounts. And that really probably caused the hair loss, among other things, and but really just overall contributed to poor nutrition. And so now there's been some adjustments made, and I do have clients who are on a GLP-1, and I am seeing that there are some that are successful. And I do have clients on a GLP-1 that are less successful. And so the big differences here, and I sort of discuss this in the blog post a little bit, is that the people that are pretty successful with the GLP-1s, they're losing weight and they're losing it at a very slow rate. And why that is important is because when we lose weight, we are going to lose a percentage of our muscle mass. And that's the stuff that we're trying to keep, right? We want to hang on to the muscle mass. It's a metabolically active tissue, and that's good for burning calories and weight loss in and of itself, but it also keeps us stronger, reduces risk of injury. So we don't want to lose that muscle mass, right? So folks were dropping a ton of weight really rapidly, and that meant a lot of muscle mass was going away. Usually with rapid weight loss, whether you're doing a GLP-1 or a low carb, keto, whatever it is, you're going to drop a ton of water weight, you're going to drop a ton of muscle mass. And that's problematic because if you are unable to sustain that way of living, and maybe you are, but if you are unable, you usually gain back the weight, and we gain back fat tissue. So we've gone through this major shift in weight, and we've lost our muscle mass, and then we put back the weight as fat. So we're sort of less healthier than when we started out originally. So we were seeing some of that with some of the higher doses in the GLP-1s and dramatic weight loss. And so you want to try to avoid that. Now that we have the dosing a little bit better, the successful folks I see already have healthy routines in place. And this is sort of like the group that may have come to me that says like, I think I'm doing like all of the things, but there's this incessant snacking that I do, and I don't have the, wherewithal to not do it, and it's really problematic. And these are the people that are doing really well in the GLP-1s, as sort of globally, everybody was reporting like it quiets the food noise, right? So you're not always thinking like, oh, maybe I'll go get a snack. And so for those folks, they're eating pretty well, they're choosing healthier foods, eating frequently throughout the day to stabilize blood sugars, constant intake of our nutrients. They're getting their movement in, they're being diligent about fitness and hydration, and managing stress and getting good sleep. And so those things in conjunction with the GLP-1s are providing a very steady and slow weight loss trend, but it continues over time. And so we're probably losing minimal muscle mass, and plus they're working on that movement. So they've got strength training on board, because it's real important to get in that protein and do your strength training if you're taking a GLP-1. And so those are the successful folks. Some of the other not successful folks, they're on the GLP-1, similar drugs, similar dosing, but really didn't have the foundation set up in place when they started the drug. They knew that they needed to be eating more healthy, but really were just, like kind of that like all or nothing. I've had this meal now, so I'm gonna have, some wings and fries and beers and that kind of stuff, and kind of kept with that model, and sporadic exercise and inconsistency. And so that's why initially without the drug you're not really losing the weight, because the consistency isn't there. The body's kind of confused, metabolism slows down, too many calories coming on board, we get fat storage. And so now we introduce a GLP-1 on top of that. We did see dramatic weight loss, and a few of these cases with people who are on GLP-1s saw dramatic weight loss initially, likely from the drug and quieting some of that food noise. But we hit this plateau, most of this group, and that plateau, in my opinion, is the drug has done what it's done, and now we don't have those successful habits in place that are going to get us to our goals. And so we're kind of at a standstill, and then we're faced with, do I up the dose? Do I risk having more side effects? What do I do here? So the issue here is that long term, we don't really know what's going to happen. I will say I've seen, folks with no side effects whatsoever. And I had a patient a couple of weeks ago in my dialysis clinic who has lost his vision and loss of his kidney function after just a few shots. So it really runs the gamut of what these side effects are. And I do want to say, I think that happened sort of in the very beginning when the dosing was a little bit off and we needed to do some tweaks in that industry. So what we want to understand is there are going to be side effects. We don't know what the long-term side effects are. There could be none or minimal. They could be very significant or extreme. We don't know because we haven't had this in development for long enough time to understand what happens in 20 years if you've been taking this. Same with any, new product, right? If you are somebody who can implement those, strong foundational habits and just need a little oomph to get you over, this might be an appropriate choice for you. If you're somebody who is morbidly obese or obese, and that weight is becoming a factor in increasing your blood pressure, fatty liver, diabetes, these types of things, it might be helpful to manage your blood sugar with these GLP-1s, which they're sort of designed to do in the first place, and take those risk factors off the table for you, realize some weight loss, and be working on these foundational healthy habits. So potentially you don't need to be on this drug long term. The webinar that I attended a month or so ago did go over some of the research, and it did show that if you were on a GLP-1 and you stopped taking the GLP-1, about 18 months later, it had completely sort of left your brain and you would revert back to wherever you were prior. So wherever you were prior is probably, what you want to think about. Where was I prior? So do I need to be building these foundational skills, and then can I incorporate a GLP-1 and then work myself to a place where I hit my goals and I can try to get off that and rely on my foundational habits? And even still, you probably will see a little bit of weight gain, but I always tell clients, like, hey, look, if you are eating well and you're moving and you're sleeping well, you're controlling your stress, you're staying hydrated, you're going to be healthier, right? You're going to hit your goals over time. And sometimes it's just we don't like the pace, right? It's not going fast enough for us, or we're not consistent is a big issue with some of these weight loss goals, right? And so you feel like you put in a whole bunch of effort for, 3 days, like, wow, this is a huge change. And then, day 4 and 5 don't look anything like days 1 through 3. And we're wondering like, hey, what's going on? Or maybe even put in a lot of effort for a month, and then you sort of revert back to old things because maybe, hey, it's graduation season or summer came and we're traveling, and these things kind of disrupted those habits that you were starting to establish, and then you're frustrated with that, and we don't realize any of the weight loss. So first of all, I pause here and say, if any of this information is helpful for you, I do a lot of these videos to sort of help the questions that I get through my coaching program throughout the week, and I share them with you guys through videos. So if you find them helpful, please subscribe to the channel so you get more videos. Give it a like so other people know, like, oh, this one was pretty good, right? And second, I want to wrap up by saying here that life is a journey, and it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, because I'm an ultra runner as well. So I like the long distance, and let's be nice to ourselves so that we're not consistently reflecting back on like, oh, I was only able to do this for, 5 days or whatever it is. Look, if you've made a habit change that's small enough and you were able to do it, 4 out of 7 days, that's a win. Okay. Don't think that's a fail because you could only do it for 4 days. 4 out of 7 is pretty high ranking. I always reference when I was writing IEPs in school or contributing to these IEPs, we never say like, student will exhibit this improved behavior 5 out of 5 times. Never. It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous assumption. So give yourself a break, right? Hey, start with 2 out of 7. You can do 2 out of 7 for the first week. It's not a fail. Now you're going to go to the next week and maybe we'll do 3 out of 7. Okay, so be kind to yourself. All right, well, thanks for joining me on today's episode of The Kitchen. And if you're interested in, checking out, well, how do I get these foundational skills? We can certainly do those and do a GLP-1 if that's the route that you choose, but I'm pretty partial to just those foundational skill sets that, can be frustrating, but with a little friend along the way to help you, it might not be so bad. So reach out if you're looking for more information on the playbook method. LifeX teaches you how to go through all of those, not all at one time, not so extreme, small baby steps that are gonna give you consistent change over time. And we also do some skill sets as to how to not beat ourselves up when we're not, dropping 50 pounds in 3 weeks. All right, everybody, thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.